Celebrating 9 years of podcast excellence, the King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents The Wrestling is Real Podcast, because wrestling needs us. We could talk about all the wrestling that's coming up at Summerslam at the end of the month in, a week and a half, which is great. But I'm going to go ahead and talk and compare the fact that for those wrestling fans out there, that if you're only WWE centric and that you don't appreciate what's going on right now when it comes to what will be happening on the 31st of July, Ric Flair's last match. It's not even so much about the match that has been scheduled and has been booked and an angle has been shot for Ric Flair to team up with Andrade El Idolo, his son-in-law, to take on the team of Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. I mean, it's a really interesting match and a very well shot angle. Old school, lots of blood. It was just a classic kind of in the parking lot kind of feel to it. Really well done, especially the docu-series for the last match and what they've done with it. It's been really good. More positive than the 30 for 30 series, but still, it's a very well done thing they've done so far. And then we also have Ring of Honor's Death Before Dishonor this weekend. Those two shows right there, to me, is indicative of what the new wrestling order is. When I've talked about this new wrestling alliance, I haven't said that in about a year and a half, but that new wrestling alliance stands out on the 31st because of this interpromotional kind of deal they're going to have. Forbidden Door was great. Don't get me wrong. It was very enjoyable. But there's something to be said about all these American promotions working together and collaborating on this, with the exception of the NWA, which I don't understand that part. But there are some NWA stars that will be preparing at Ring of Honor's Death Before Dishonor with some great stuff going on throughout. And what I want to talk about is just the exposure of what Nashville is going to be and what things are going to look like next week. Because we can talk about Death Before Dishonor. We're going to bring that up a little bit later on and talk about what's going to go on with that. Of course, we'll do a post show for Death Before Dishonor right here at WrestlingIsReal.com on Saturday night. We will do that. So make sure to look for that. And as I said, the following week, I will do a post show for SummerSlam on Saturday night. And then I will do a post show for Ric Flair's last match on Sunday night. I really have enjoyed what's being built up for all these three cards because SummerSlam is very good. But what I'm really going to be fascinated by is the fact that some of these, my fellow wrestling podcasters, and how they refuse not to really say much about anything. See, when they look at Ric Flair's last match, they're only focusing on the last match. When I'm going to say over and over, look at this undercard. Do not sleep on this undercard, because there are going to be some curious people watching Ric Flair's last match premium live event on pay-per-view. And there's going to be some names that are on that card that people will not be that familiar with, or they're going to just say, oh, these are flash in the pans. These are matches from years ago. But if you've not been, well, I'm sorry, NWA is represented on Ric Flair's last match. My correction. All I'm saying is, you look at some of the matches that are being booked. Don't sleep on this undercard. Do not sleep on this show. Like, I listened to a little bit of Busted Open. I haven't listened to him in a while, but I know that Ric Flair and Conrad Thompson were on that show. And Conrad Thompson being responsible for the card that he booked for, I mean, the StarCast stuff looks really good. Don't get me wrong. That looks really good. The Roast of Ric Flair, that looks like it's fun. But that undercard, that match card for Ric Flair's last match, there's going to be some matches that are going to stand out above and beyond that will shine past Ric Flair's last match. And even Ric Flair going on to Busted Open, he says, shit, I'm going to have to follow these guys because there are some matches on here that should not be. Conrad Thompson, I appreciate the fact that he called. He basically called it a co-main event because when you're looking at the Impact Wrestling World title being defended and a dream match in my eyes that Josh Alexander is going to defend that belt. And this is not a pushover, not even by the slightest. The longest reigning MLW World Heavyweight Champion, the Samoan Werewolf, Jacob Fatu. The guy is phenomenal. Jacob Fatu is going to get some real exposure. The MLW star is going to get some great exposure on this show. When you look at Josh Alexander going up against Jacob Fatu, when you look at the Von Erichs working this night as well, I mean, this is all wonderful. I mean, and what is this about? And by the way, could we see MLW and Impact working together once they do this Ric Flair's last match? And then what does Jim Crockett Promotions mean after this is all said and done? This boggles the mind and everything that's being done right here. Like this, I have not felt so much anticipation for an interpromotional event since the G1 Supercard. I'm not kidding. I'm more excited about this than Forbidden Door, as a matter of fact. This card right here, I mean, and I'm surprised how many of my fellow podcast wrestling brethren are not even highlighting the rest of these matches and the rest of this card that's coming up in a week and a half. I don't know why. Why are people sleeping on this show? Why would they do that? But there's such great talent on the card, and there's a lot of young talent. Let's make that point as well. You got Brian Pillman Jr., you got Brock Anderson, you got Kerry Morton, the Von Erichs, and then who knows who's going to be now in the newly announced Bunkhouse Battle Royal, of which Bully Ray is the only participant that has officially accepted the invite to be a part of the Bunkhouse Battle Royal. We haven't mentioned that part either. There's so much to be said of this night and what's going to be done on this show. And don't get me wrong, SummerSlam is going to be the bigger show. It's the big stadium show that will be happening the night before. But I'm sure some people are going to be paying attention because, you know, the wrestling media is going to go on with what they're going to talk about. They spent time the other day talking about the match angle and that the match being announced on Monday night of this tag team match for Ric Flair. And then now the talk was, after Busted Open, the possibility would Charlotte Flair be in attendance, let alone be a part of an angle or appear on the show. And Ric Flair even himself was saying, well, he knows that Charlotte's going to be in an appearance. Will be appearing in the crowd, but not on camera. Most likely not on camera. Pretty unlikely. And everybody's up on that, up and at it about that. And that's what they're getting the headlines for. And listen, if that gets more people to watch Ric Flair's last match, that's fine. That's great. But for what it's worth, SummerSlam goes on at Nissan Stadium. I don't know what their setup is right now and how they're doing in terms of tickets. And then as for Ric Flair's last match, they're almost sold out. Of course, they're at a 9,000 seat Nashville Municipal Auditorium where they're going to be at themselves. So near 9,000 folks at Nashville Municipal Auditorium compared to where Death Before Dishonor this weekend. They're looking at probably getting well over 3,000 people at the Saga Center in Lowell, Massachusetts for that show, which is cool. And it's funny about some of the ticket sales that are going on for some of the other events. Clash at the Castle at Cardiff, Wales for WWE. That show actually currently already has 60,000 tickets distributed, and it got 71,000 available for that event. So they're going to do fine when they get back out overseas. Last check for SummerSlam, the current setup and capacity was 36,000, and they had 30,000 tickets sold, and this was as of July 13th. So in the last week, I'm sure they probably got a little bit closer to that, and they might have opened up some more seats for all we know. So we know where the crowds are going to be for all these three events coming up. But it's the intrigue of what's going to come out of these shows, the newsworthy headlines that will come out after all of this, which is what I'm concerned about, what I'm really curious about. But Nashville is going to be a hell of a place to be next weekend. Music City is going to make some music with all this wrestling and all this old school feel to it. And when you think about it, there was one story that Wrestling Headlines put up that was a very interesting story about how Jim Crockett Promotions, at the end of their run, the pay-per-view that ultimately took them down and forced them to have to sell to Ted Turner was SummerSlam. So this story came up here from Wrestling Headlines. I thought it was quite fascinating. The Sportster said that. I'm sorry. I am correcting myself. The Sportster.com put the story out about the pay-per-view that put the final nail in the coffin of Jim Crockett Promotions. The inaugural SummerSlam would end up being the final nail in the coffin for Jim Crockett Promotions before it metamorphosed into WCW. So as we know with Jim Crockett Promotions, they didn't necessarily put so many pay-per-views as they did Clash of the Champions shows, which would air on TBS. So the 2-hour live events that were pay-per-view quality, which they were. Now, they say that in 1987, WWE had a strong hold on the majority of the wrestling world, but was unable to draw Ric Flair, who was the NWA's World Heavyweight Champion at the time, to their promotion. And using the momentum that Crockett Promotions continued to push forward with their pay-per-view regulars, including Starrcade and Bunkhouse Stampede, but then Crockett started moving their events to Chicago and New York and out of the South. And the WWF, World Wrestling Federation, responded with threats that if cable companies showed the Crockett pay-per-views, they wouldn't have a chance for the rights to future World Wrestling Federation events. And the strong arm tactic paired with their newest debuting pay-per-view and network specials, Survivor Series and the Royal Rumble, airing head-to-head with the Crockett counterparts, left Jim Crockett Promotions scrambling. The last effort NWA and Jim Crockett Promotions had was a debut of their special event, Clash of the Champions. Geared to be the biggest wrestling event of the year, it was once again met with opposition with the World Wrestling Federation, who ran WrestleMania 4 the same night. And after successes and victory over Jim Crockett Promotions in the ratings war, McMahon wanted to continue to push the envelope of sports entertainment even further with another debut in 1988 of SummerSlam. It debuted in Madison Square Garden, and they sold out Madison Square Garden with quite a card. A dynamic tag team match, the Mega Powers, Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, going head-to-head with the Mega Bucks team of Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant. Then you also remember that Miss Elizabeth removed the skirt of her dress to expose a swimsuit and distract the heel team so the good guys could win that match. And then also had one of the most historic runs in World Wrestling Federation history, the open challenge issued by the Honky Tonk Man, who was at the time the Intercontinental Champion, who was answered for the call by the Ultimate Warrior. A Warrior came out and in less than a minute ended one of the most historic title reigns in the company's history. And there was also the Hart Foundation, after their controversial heel turn on manager Jimmy Hart, leading to the match against Demolition, Axe and Smash. And then Cheryl Roberts' face appearing on the tights of Rick Rude in Rick Rude's match against Jake the Snake Roberts, ravishing Rick Rude. Like, those are the 3 monster main event matches right there that happened. And people were talking about SummerSlam so much after that show in 88. And then in November 1988, Jim Crockett Promotions sold the majority of their company to Ted Turner and Turner Broadcasting Group, which then the company would be known, the wrestling portion would be World Championship Wrestling, named after the TV show that it was named on Sunday nights at 6:05 Eastern. By 1993, Jim Crockett Promotions was closing its doors for good. So we haven't heard that name used for promotional purposes in almost 30 years. I mean, well, to promote a wrestling event, which is so bittersweet to me that Ric Flair and David Crockett and all these people that are in here to work on this show, and with Conrad Thompson somehow coming into the space. I feel like Conrad Thompson almost has like this Billy Corgan kind of feel to it. This attachment to old school wrestling and to the legacy, the sport that is professional wrestling, which is what I grew up on. Because for me, growing up as a wrestling fan, I know many fans out there are very much attached to World Wrestling Federation, WWE Attitude Era, But for me, I always had a mix of everything else, which is what makes me such a well-rounded wrestling fan. I don't want to talk about World Wrestling Entertainment all the time. I really would like to talk about other promotions, but I don't get the chance to do that because I know what the audience wants to hear. Like, I did try to talk about other promotions early on in my series, in the early run of this almost 10-year run of this program, and episode 706. But the thing is that I saw the numbers. I saw the retention of the audience, and I know that the fans here, no matter where you are around the world, you still want me to hear, you want to still hear me talk about the major promotion, the end-all, be-all, top promotion in professional wrestling or sports entertainment, WWE, which I do. I don't have a problem talking about that. But it also gives me a chance, because of the way I repurpose the argument, talking about how, as always, we want to see WWE succeed because it furthers the progress and the growth of the other organizations. And for where we are in the current state of things, WWE still stands on top, averaging almost 2 million viewers or up to 2 million viewers for SmackDown or Raw every given week at the moment. And then seeing their counterparts, like, say, Dynamite getting between, 800 to 1 million viewers, 800,000 to 1 million viewers any given Wednesday night, or 300 to 400 to 500,000 viewers for Friday night on Rampage. And then I look at Impact Wrestling, and they're pulling, maybe about 150,000 viewers on average for their shows now. The Ring of Honor inclusion has kind of helped out with all the Honor No More folks not being part of the new promotion yet. But we don't know if they'll get called back or what could happen to those folks. But right now they're working the Impact, and that's how it works. And then you have the other shows that are out there on YouTube with MLW and NWA that are doing their thing, and we're having fun watching them. And that's where I get this whole feeling, a notion of enjoyment, because I have 5 different promotions to enjoy on a regular basis. And I love it. And I get enjoyment from all the stars that each of these promotions have. Because I don't really feel like I get such sloppy or bad wrestling on a regular basis for the most part. Even NXT I get some enjoyment out of. There are a number of stars I look forward to seeing on that show. So I can give that some credence. And I think they're doing a good job where there could be some stars, some diamonds in the rough that will come out of NXT 2.0 and move into the main roster, which we're hoping for. But I don't worry about everybody else and the whole thought process where you come to this show for a different perspective and a different mindset anyways. It's the mindset that might not be solely popular. Like, I'm not trying to pop a rating here. Like, I know, listen, I got my thousands of listeners here every week, and that's okay. And I'm not pulling hundreds of thousands of listeners, and I'm not pulling YouTube numbers and all this and that. Like, I'm not pulling for clickbait. I'm not going for the wrestling media type where they're going for spin and gossip and all this other stuff. I don't worry about that. Nothing salacious, nothing over the top. We're talking wrestling here. The reality of the fact that we are all wrestling fans here, and that I like to be the well-rounded wrestling fan to talk about wrestling all across the board of other wrestling promotions I can watch on TV. And of course, there's other shows I can be watching that I could take a look at, but there's just only so much time in the week to watch. Like right now, just to keep up with WWE, AEW, Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling, MLW, and NWA, there's not enough time for me to watch any of the wrestling. It's about 20 hours a week. That's as much as I can give. I can't make enough time for GCW or WOW or New Japan or AAA, even though I wish I had the time to, because some of that programming would really be really good too. But it's just only so much time there is in the week to get all this done. Plus my other content as well. But I get to enjoy a lot of good wrestling across the board. Really good quality production. Everything's set up. I mean, compared to what I used to watch back in the day where it was WCW and ECW. And ECW was such a raw, underproduced product on across the board. Like, it was really incredible what they got away with and what they were pulling off over there. So I feel like we're going to get a lot of good production value coming off of this Ric Flair's last match. My guess is the old TBS crew is going to come back. Keith Mitchell's going to come out of retirement. He's going to work this show and run the controls. And they're going to run this thing to document this show and really make it special. I mean, the fact of the matter is they already moved this out of the fairgrounds and bumped this up to Municipal Auditorium. That's a step up. And there's a lot of history behind that particular venue I learned about, the Good Housekeeping match, the Jarrett's final match in WWF, was there. Ric Flair had one of his best matches against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat at that venue, among other things. Like, that's an NWA spectacular venue right there. Jeff Jarrett has a lot of history at that venue. There's a lot of that going on when you think about it. So, all that's wonderful. Everything they've done. And then just the way they put things together. Like, if you are a wrestling fan and if you got an open mindset and you're not one of these people that are on Twitter that are just constantly bashing one of the other major promotions, WWE or AEW, like, for me, it doesn't make a difference. Like, I mean, I really enjoy what AEW does. I've said that over and over. They are working to be to the standard that has been set by WWE in the first place. That's not easy. But they got a lot of great wrestlers on there. And I think I'm starting to form a kind of a thought process of what they do. But I'm not one to go ahead and bash Tony Khan and what they're trying to do. Like, I do enjoy the amount of variety they have on that show. Like, we're not getting the same angles over and over and over. And some of them, when they're being done pretty consistently, they're okay. And they're always leading to pay-per-views. We're always getting, I mean, the build to pay-per-views is great. The stuff in between is fine. Dark Elevation, I'm fine with that. But I'm starting to feel like with Dark Elevation for me, I mean, it is part of those squash matches. I mean, unless I'm able to make the time to go and watch the hour-long shows each time, like, I'm only watching them right before Raw or NXT 2.0. I'm not going back to them. It's not necessarily for me because by that point, I already have MLW Fusion coming up on Wednesdays or on Thursdays. I'll already have NWA coming up on Friday and Saturday. Like, there's enough there to work off of. I don't have enough time to get back to everything else. But for me, it's the wrestling that we have with some of these other stars that are out there. And I can appreciate what Tony Khan does because he is stretching himself a bit thin because he has to do the Ring of Honor shows. I mean, in this year, for him to stretch himself out because he needed to do something to really make good with his partnership with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Some people are going to feel like the AEW has kind of like lost a bit of focus. Plus, they've also had a bunch of injuries. Adam Cole's not able to work out right now. Bryan Danielson's still on the shelf. CM Punk's on the shelf. There is the advantage of having these other things going on to help preoccupy people's minds when you're watching wrestling. When you don't have those stars out there to watch, you have other things that you're watching that are pretty interesting. Jericho Appreciation Society against the Blackpool Combat Club, right? Or against Kingston and the rest of the team there with Santana Ortiz, some of the remnants of the Inner Circle, right? There's that that's been really good so far. Blackpool Combat Club also being part of that as well. And then you look at the things with Acclaimed and Gun Club. I'm enjoying that. Christian Cage, Luchasaurus, enjoying that. The fact we don't have MJF right now on TV and we have not gotten any further progress on that storyline, well, okay. But it's not, see, the thing is, everybody's worried about having these storylines continue to go along and that all these high profile former WWE guys have to be shown on a regular basis. No, I don't care about that. See, those are the other fans out there. You can appreciate all you want. I understand where you're coming from. But for me, I want to enjoy whatever's being given because I think the alternative that we're getting on AEW programming, when it came to New Japan, like, I liked the matches they had where Thunder Rosa took on this, Yakishita or whatever her name is. Takeshita Yakisha. I'm not sure how to say all these names, but Thunder Rosa, they showed the match on Dark in Japan. She was featured there. She lost. Now she's giving a title shot to this Japanese star, which is great. They had the whole setup for Forbidden Door. Claudia comes into the play. Like, they were integrating things that were AEW centric and things with New Japan. And even though New Japan was only going to be here for a while and then we're going to like not come back, there was not going to be any follow through after that. They've done a good job of building things up. And eventually we're going to get to some things coming up for All Out that we'll enjoy. They got some more time. Listen, they got another month and a half to kind of get things squared away on where they're going to go with that. And in the meantime, they have to worry about that. They have to worry about Grand Slam. They got other things going on. But like, for the most part, I'm enjoying watching Dynamite. I look forward to it. It's must-see TV for me live. I don't worry to watch that on tape. And for the most part, I try to do my best to get to watch Rampage live, because the problem is that my movie theater here on Friday nights, they don't put movies regularly after 11 o'clock. They're usually like 10, 15, 10:30 is the last showing on a Friday night opening night showing. And I'm not going to give up my Saturday night for the movies. I want Friday nights. So I might catch Rampage on delay afterward. I'll just catch it when I get home. But for the most part, I want to watch Rampage. I want to watch Dynamite live. I usually want to try to catch Dark and Dark Elevation when I can, when it happens. And then Raw and SmackDown live. And then MLW probably that night, or I will catch up on it during the weekend. Same thing with NWA. I'll catch it on Saturday and Sunday. But then I got the pay-per-views to worry about. And when those things start to get cluttered together, that makes it a little bit tough. Because we're going to get that coming up now. A few other times we're going to get that same thing where there will be multiple shows. But for me, SummerSlam is going to be a great show. But my interest especially is Ric Flair's last match. Now think about it like this. The clutter that we have, August is kind of quiet. The only thing we'll have in August for sure is NWA 74. That's our featured for August. But then September, that Labor Day weekend is wild. Clash of the Castle on September 3rd, and then All Out September 4th. Like those kind of things right now working each other is quite interesting. So I'm curious where things go with all of that. But for the most part, we have good things going on with all this. And then we don't know what the shows are going to be coming up after the fact. I mean, a good thing Ring of Honor has this show here where it's not cluttered in everything else that's going on. But that's also because Tony Khan, the way they're setting up these shows, it's different. Because normally we would not have a show in July. Like if I remember, all the big 4 pay-per-views that Ring of Honor normally would do, there are 4 regular shows that you expect all the time. In March is Ring of Honor's anniversary show. Best in the World is normally July, which we're not doing this year. Death Before Dishonor is normally the September into the fall pay-per-view, and then Final Battle. But this year's different. Instead, Supercard of Honor was the featured show in April. Now we're getting Death Before Dishonor here. Death Before Dishonor 19. And then I'm guessing we're going to have to get Final Battle coming up at the end of the year if we get it all said and done. Hopefully that's what they're going to do. But now, here's the thing. I don't know yet, because Best in the World could be a show they're doing as well at the end of the year. I don't know, but I'm guessing they'll have something going on with that. I'm not sure what to think. But see, Ring of Honor has gotten a step up. You're looking at what they're doing in terms of where they're hosting the events is pretty cool. I mean, for instance, when you look at past years and where they would hold the events at, normally Best in the World or Final Battle, they were being held in Baltimore in Sinclair's backyard because you could always get that arena. And if they did anywhere else, it would be like Sam's Town Hotel and Gambling Hall, or they would do the Orleans Arena in Vegas, or the UNO Lakefront, or the Hammerstein, or the 2300 Arena, or Lakeland Center. Like, they were just doing smaller events. But, like, Tony is picking some bigger places to go. Now, one of the early things that's being said is that it looks like the Sam's Town might hold the 21st anniversary show, and actually is kind of slated for March 18th, 2023. But we still have to see if there's going to be one more event coming up for after Death Before Dishonor. And what it looks like is it would be Best in the World. I hope if we're going to get another one, it'll be Best in the World. It would be the one that comes up in fall, and the Final Battle comes up in December. So why not? Like, think about it. You have that pay-per-view after Full Gear in November, and you have this. You give us that Ring of Honor show right there in that middle part where there's no TLC going on for WWE because you're going to have the Day One show now on January 1st. But it's interesting on some of these shows that kind of clash with each other and what's going to get the buzz at the end of the weekend. That's what I'm curious about. Next weekend is going to be tremendous what they have. I'd like to see where it's going to go. So far we know for Death Before Dishonor, we'll talk about that first. A lot of matches already figured out for this Saturday. Two more matches have been announced for this event. Vincent Bateman and Dutch will be featuring the Righteous, and they'll defend their Ring of Honor 6-man tag team titles against Dalton Castle and the Boys. Don't know where we're going to have that match, but we haven't seen the 6-man tag titles in a while. But we're seeing some stars from other promotions. Vincent is with Honor No More right now in Impact Wrestling. And Allison Kay will take on Willow Nightingale in their pre-show. Allison Kay is a former NWA Women's World Heavyweight Champion. And Willow Nightingale, most recently, is working, I believe she's worked in WOW, but more importantly, I know her because of her work at MLW in the featherweight division in there, of which the title holder there is Taya Valkyrie. You know, it's one of those things where MLW will have other stars working multiple promotions, and MLW will occasionally get some stars that might be from AEW or NWA or Impact, things like that. Well, not so much Impact. MLW will work NWA and a bit with AEW here and there, it looks like, when you see from time to time. So, we talked about the pre-show match. Otherwise, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 matches on the card. Let's go through them and preview and predict. So, Righteous against Dalton Castle and the Boys. This is one of those titles I never really cared to see back. This is just towards the end of the Ring of Honor run that after the New Japan relationship kind of soured, you know, you could really see the exposure of the lack of star power that they had on that brand, which I was complaining towards the end of the brand with Sinclair because of where things were going. But nevertheless, I think the Righteous will retain. But hey, it gives Dalton Castle a chance to be on the pay-per-view here, which is nice. Wheeler Yuta, Daniel Garcia for the Ring of Honor Pure title. Interesting to see these two stars in this match. Should be a hell of a match. Really great match to have here. And it's a tough toss-up, but I'm going to say Daniel Garcia takes the Ring of Honor Pure title. I don't know. Off decision. I'll just say it like that. Serena Deeb, Mercedes Martinez. After Mercedes Martinez became the undisputed Ring of Honor Women's Champion, I think Serena Deeb takes that belt. I do. Samoa Joe against Jay Lethal for the Ring of Honor television title. I think Jay Lethal takes it. Jay Lethal having a belt again, especially on that brand and everything that's going on, will be helpful for him. I think Jay Lethal, it just makes sense for him to go back and become a title holder again for that brand. Especially with the fact that in the booking of Tony Khan, I think he does, with Ring of Honor, he does like to have certain stars that are veterans holding those belts and then having other stars to go up and take them on. So in this case, I really think Jay Lethal, given his lineage with Ring of Honor, will get that television title back. Be a 3-time TV champ. Claudio Castagnoli against Jonathan Gresham of the Foundation, no longer being called the Octopus right now, but instead being called the Foundation, named after the faction that he did have before all those players were faded off. So Gresham and Castagnoli, that's a hell of a match to have. I believe there's going to be a lot of title changes. There were title changes quite a bit on Supercard of Honor. I believe we're going to get that here too. So I do believe the Ring of Honor Pure Champion will be Daniel Garcia. Serena Deeb will be the Ring of Honor Women's World Champion. Jay Lethal will be Ring of Honor Television Champion. And I think Claudio Castagnoli is going to win the Ring of Honor World Championship. And as for FTR versus the Briscoes, 2 out of 3 falls match for the Ring of Honor Tag Team titles, I don't see FTR losing those belts. No. I think the Briscoes are looking down the line to win the NWA tag team titles. Because I think what's going to happen is the Briscoes, they probably will come back to the NWA and they'll go after Commonwealth Connection. I think that's what will happen down the line at some point. But we also don't know what's going to happen yet with NWA 74 if any matches have been announced yet anyways. Because at the moment, they have not announced anything for the World Tag Team titles, but Commonwealth Connection will have to have somebody to go up against them. The United States Tag Team titles are going to be restored, and they're going to have a battle royal at NWA 74 to determine the new United States Tag Team champions. Interesting. The last time the U.S. Tag Team titles were brought on was July 31st, 1992. Interesting. So as of that time, the last champions were the Barbarian and Dick Slater. And they have not brought it up since. It started in 86 and then retired in 92. It wasn't there for that long, that's for sure. And for the most part, the team that held the belts for the longest was the Midnight Express. When it was Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, they held it for 346 days. Other teams that were United States Tag Team champions, by the way, Ron Garvin and Barry Windham, the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, the Varsity Club, Kevin Sullivan and Steve Williams held the belt for a little while. The Steiners won those belts and held them for 225 days. The Fabulous Freebirds held those belts. The Young Pistols, Steve Armstrong and Tracy Smothers. And a whole lot of different stars that were there in the first place. But yeah, it's a very interesting set of belts that are deciding to bring back. So I'm curious what they're going to do with that. Then they still have Trevor Murdoch, which we know now, and this will be spoiled because if you haven't already watched Power, they went through the finals of the NWA Race of the Chase tournament, and Nick Aldis has made it into the championship match, and he will go after Sweet Charlotte, the 10 pounds of gold. He will take on Trevor Murdoch in a rematch for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. And Homicide, which they already announced before, is going to defend the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Championship against Kerry Morton. And most likely, Colin King is going to probably go after Camille on the Women's World title. I'm guessing she'll be the one going after the Burke. Something like that so far. But anyway, that's coming up August 29th. So Death Before Dishonor looks like a great show. And for me, and I'll also take Willow Nightingale over Allison Kay for that particular pre-show. That's where I think things are going to go with Death Before Dishonor. Now, let me move along into what's coming up next weekend. And the comparison of what we're getting with the pay-per-views that we're going to get. Now, yes, we're all going to focus on Ric Flair's last match, the actual match itself. As we said, Ric Flair and Andrade El Idolo versus Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. By the way, I didn't make mention of that it was accompanying Jeff Jarrett will be his wife, Karen Jarrett. Yes, that Karen Jarrett. And I thought the way they put it together on building up this feud, this angle was actually pretty good. So I want to bring all that up here pretty quickly. The one thing that people were kind of really surprised by, which I was surprised by, was that there was not a lot of heat for the match. But if you're going to do it, yeah, this is a good way to do it. I mean, the placing of the stars here, there are some personal connections for Ric Flair to all three stars that are working with him in the match. We know that Jay Lethal and Ric Flair had the wonderful back and forth of the impression, and Jay Lethal and Ric Flair had a pretty good feud going on in TNA. We know Flair and Jarrett have had a long history before, as if you didn't know. Jeff Jarrett, in a very great angle, was considered to be the next member of the Four Horsemen, and then he got screwed. which was great. That was the Nitro days, by the way, where Jarrett thought he was going to be a part of that. He was out with Deborah McMichael out during that time. Steve McMichael was part of the team. Benoit was with that team. So it was Flair, Anderson, McMichael, and Benoit, which was a great version, by the way, of the Four Horsemen. I will say it wasn't the best. I mean, it's still the best Four Horsemen today. I mean, listen, don't get me wrong with Ole Anderson, but I think your best Four Horsemen was Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Barry Windham. That's where I feel was like the strength, was probably the most cohesive, strongest Four Horsemen unit there was. But we know that Ole was there for a long time. I don't look at Tom Zank. I still think it's funny. Or no, not Tom Zank. Paul Roma. Oh my God. Paul Roma. That's crazy. I think it was funny when they introduced him. That was really, really funny. And then also wasn't Hiro Mashida part of that too, which was also just was a mistake. So anyway, the storyline they put together in the the docu-series, by the way, TMZ obviously having an affinity for Ric Flair, they put this out there. And they have really tried to make a good shoot style match for this pay-per-view. Because I think they really did a great job of doing this part. This was really cool. So you have footage from a June press conference where Ric Flair's last match featuring Ric Flair, David Crockett, Jeff Jarrett, and Nashville's deputy mayor, Brenda Haywood. And Haywood mentioned that July 31st will be Ric Flair Day in Music City. Jarrett says he won't be in Ric's last match, but is there to support Conrad Thompson and Starrcade 5 convention that he'll be a part of. And then Flair ribs Double J by giving him 2 tickets for the event, saying they're for Jeff and his dad, Jerry. I think it was pretty funny how they did that. Then they show in the parking lot after the press conference, things get nutty. Lethal's waiting to confront Flair after being left off the card. And as if you didn't know, they have shown video from TMZ and other places where Jay Lethal has been training Ric Flair for the last 3 months, preparing him for his last match. But Lethal was not on the card. He was not put in a match, which I thought was actually kind of ironic. But now that makes sense why they didn't put him in the card, because they were doing this. So in the storyline, Jarrett and his wife Karen at first try to help calm things down with Lethal going after Nature Boy Ric Flair. But then, so Lethal pounds down Flair. And then Jarrett, trying to help bring Ric Flair up, refuses the assistance and starts giving some unkind words for the Jarrett family. And then Jeff just has enough and starts beating down Ric Flair. And took Karen Jarrett's heel and dug it into his head. And you know Ric Flair can bleed like a stuck pig because of all the abuse he's had to his forehead. So that was pretty easy to do. Jay Lethal wearing white, Karen Jarrett wearing white. So make sure the blood looks good. So old school. Also David Crockett also being in the out there with Ric Flair and also being involved in the storyline, which is really cool. And at one point, Jeff demands Karen gives her his spiked heel shoe, uses it to bust open, then Ric Flair, his blood is dripping on the pavement, and he has the Crimson Mask is there. He's moaning and about it being hard way, and then Jeff throws a few marks about never liking the Crockett's before walking off to the sunset with his wife and his new tag partner, all three covered in Nature's blood. Fantastic storyline. So we didn't have to have it as part of this show because it was just this show. I mean, there's no implications about what happens to Ric Flair after this. This is his last match. So this match could have just been a send off, but no, they decided to put some heat in the match. Pretty good heat to get Ric Flair over as the face. I mean, Nate still comes off as a dick. Cage Side Seat says it right, but he's always his best as a heel. So he has to have some of that arrogance. Like Ric Flair has to be that. But people are going to cheer Ric Flair for that match. They're going to boo Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. I'm pretty sure of that. Because we can also expect that, and the Cage Side Seat says it pretty right, Flair's going to probably bleed more than bump in that match. And the question they ask is, does it convince you to buy the show if you weren't already going to? I'm already buying it. I'm already in for this match. I'm already in for this pay-per-view. But I'll tell you, Flair's last match is one thing. Like, that's a great match on the card. But I believe in my heart of hearts, the rest of this card is going to be hard to hold up. It's going to be hard for that last match to compare, because I think there's going to be a lot of great matches we're going to get out of this night that are going to be the talk. Like, I think Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez, they're going to be talking some big talk about what they're getting out of this last match card, because the undercard is not being talked about enough. I am going to say it over and over again. I will say it next week. This last match undercard is fantastic. We'll just go through these matches one more time, and then I'll talk about SummerSlam in a minute. So in the matches, you got the Impact World Heavyweight Championship. And Josh Alexander, which I wish there was a storyline for this, him and Jacob Fatu for the world title. You're just giving us that match. That's amazing. Scott D'Amore, I can't believe you let and Court Byer, thank you for letting this match happen. Thank you so much. I mean, it's going to be tough to say who wins. You can't say that Jacob Fatu doesn't have a good chance in this match. I hope what will happen is this will entice viewers to say, you know what, we want to see these two guys again. Like, I'd love to see MLW and Impact Wrestling working together and seeing some cross promotion right now. Maybe even a cross promotional event would be wonderful. I'd love to see that. I hope Court Bauer and Scott D'Amore and Ed Norholm and the team are talking to each other about this. And then the Knockouts title. Look, I mean, you could have just given me Jordynne Grace and Deonna Purrazzo. I'd have been very happy. Rachael Ellering is a nice jump into this, because you know that Rachael Ellering and Jordynne Grace as a tag team, there's obviously some story from there. So this Impact Knockouts title is a nice thing to have. I mean, Rachael Ellering is good, but for me, the story for me is Jordynne Grace and Deonna Purrazzo. And could they possibly have Deonna Purrazzo take the belt back? I don't know. But of course, you know I love Deonna Purrazzo. I think she's amazing. Jordynne Grace is awesome. Could try to stay off the Twitter machine talking about Chris Benoit, just saying. But of course, she made her point trying to correct all that. I didn't get into that whole gossip. It was not something I was going to talk about unless you prefer me to talk about it. You tell me on the show that you prefer me to talk about it. Otherwise, I'm not. Like, I'm not going to volunteer to talk about that kind of story. But that was the talk last week. A bona fide great match with the Machine Guns, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin against the American Wolves. Bringing the Wolves back together for the first time since, 2012? And then the other story they said was the fact that the Machine Guns and the Wolves never faced each other except once at a house show, an indie show. We never saw this match on TV, so I'm very excited for this match. These guys could do a barn burner. Killer Kross against Davey Boy Smith Jr., that also intrigues me. And what you're going to do with that match. And Davey Boy Smith now was in MLW. They were pushing him a lot. And then just things changed up once Brian Pillman and, split apart, and Teddy Hart obviously got himself in trouble. That whole thing kind of just changed things up. But I look at that and I'm saying, man, Killer Kross, another appearance here. Where are we going to get with him? What kind of a look are we going to get with him? Because Killer Kross hasn't had much TV exposure on MLW, which I was expecting to have, but he hasn't had as much as I hoped. And Davey Boy Smith Jr., we've seen him in the Commonwealth Connection. He's currently tag team champions with Doug Williams, and that's been cool. I like that. So I want to see where that comes from. At Triple Mania, not too recently, the second Triple Mania of the year, they had a 5-way match with the AAA stars, and I forget who was the 5th member, but Ray Fenix, Laredo Kid, Black Taurus, and Bandido are going to be in a fatal 4-way match. Fantastic. I mean, we're getting so many different things of the various styles as well. We're going to get Japanese strong style. Clark Connors, Ren Narita from the New Japan Dojo in this show. You're getting Ray Fenix, Laredo Kid, Black Taurus, Bandido, and the Mexican Lucha Libre realm. And then you're getting some great tag team matches. And then the legacy part. which is the extra special touch this Ric Flair's last match undercard has, when you're going to go ahead and have the bunkhouse battle royal, when you're going to do a legacy match where, obviously with Ric Flair, and then you got Rick and Kerry Morton representing the Rock and Roll Express, which, by the way, Kerry Morton's really good. Looks a lot like his daddy, by the way. But, I mean, seriously, Rick and Kerry Morton. Ricky and Kerry Morton, amazing we're seeing these guys out here. Robert Gibson will also appear with the Mortons, and then Brock Anderson, Brian Pillman Jr. will be accompanied by Arn Anderson, representing the Four Horsemen. Damn. That's just a fun match altogether. I can't wait to see what that's going to be. I hope Tully Blanchard gets to be a part of this some way, somehow. I mean, obviously, he's part of Four Horsemen. I'd love to see him here if that's possible. And then we got the Bunkhouse Battle Royal. That is just fantastic all across the board. I love this pay-per-view for what it's going to be and what it's going to represent. It's a wonderful thing to see. Now, I'm not talking much WWE at all tonight. Of course, I have to talk about it a little bit here, so we'll do that. SummerSlam coming up next Saturday. And with that said, I'm not going to say much when it comes to like the build of the show, which I never really expect much of, but we can talk a little bit about the build and then what the show's looking like right now and how it's getting to shape up. But they do have a pretty good card put together. Jeff Jarrett working double duty on that weekend. He will be special guest referee for the undisputed WWE Tag Team title match with the Street Profits and the Usos. I think of that match, we've already known that the Street Profits are going to probably be split up and Montez Ford will split off. So I think the split will happen here in this title match where one more chance at the tag titles, disappointment, and Montez Ford will split off. Which is where I think we're going to go with things. Then you got Pat McAfee and Happy Corbin. And I forget who it was. I think it was Conan and Disco Inferno that say, don't sleep on Happy Corbin. Like, the guy is really good. I know people don't like him. They don't want to like him. But Baron Corbin has been a very solid guy. And I really don't understand why they've never given that guy any titles at all, but they don't put him up there in the title picture at all. And I don't know if you can do that with Happy Corbin, but the thing is I think there should be some point down the line where Corbin gets somewhere into a title picture. Like, what I think you do is you move him over to Raw. But I mean, we have to find out what happens with the wrinkle of the storyline that is the Undisputed Universal Championship with Reigns and Lesnar, where we know that Theory could come in and interfere. Not interfere, but he could cash in. And then if Theory comes into play, do we still have the belts combined? What do we do after that? But I always feel like Corbin could be somewhere up in the card. I don't see why Baron Corbin has never been Intercontinental Champion. I think he's been U.S. Champion, but I don't think he's been IC Champion. And he should be. Like, after Gunther goes through this thing, wherever they're going to go with him, I'd like to see Corbin be a champion somewhere and get that kind of belt. But they don't ever look at him that way. I don't know. Seth Rollins and Riddle should be an excellent match. These guys are doing a really good job in terms of storyline. That's been really cool and solid and positive. Bobby Lashley in Theory for the U.S. title. We know that Dolph Ziggler's going to be involved in this. And I'm wondering if Ziggler's going to be involved in that U.S. title match and does some outside interference somehow for Lashley to go ahead and retain the belt. We'll see what they do with the show coming up on TV, and they kind of give us any kind of insinuations there might be something like that happening. Logan Paul and The Miz now is a one-on-one match. That's cool. I'm not sure about Logan Paul being the face, but so far, so good. But I mean, for the WWE crowd, they're doing what they can to give him over as a face. Meanwhile, he's going to be hated by everybody else. Let's just say it like that. That Impulsive TV they're going to do next week, I want to see where that goes. And what they're allowed to let him do, because obviously his YouTube show does really well. Where could things go with this so far? By the way, he cut a pretty good promo on The Miz. I'll give him that too. Liv Morgan, Ronda Rousey. maybe something happens here where there's some kind of a return. I wouldn't be surprised if Bayley comes back somewhere, somehow on this. And that Liv Morgan becomes a transitional champion. Rousey gets the belt back. And then Bayley comes out and wants to go into a program with Rousey going forward. I could definitely see that happening. And that's where things look like right now with the card, which is not a bad card. But when you look at the build, Bianca Belair and Becky Lynch, we're going to get a rematch there, Raw Women's title. You know, the freshness is not much there. You're getting a lot of matches we've already seen before. The storylines have been fine, but it's what they're going to do. They're not going to do much more in the card to really build much to anything else. That's all they're going to do. I don't know. That's fine. I can live with that. And of course, I looked at Dynamite tonight, and people were definitely going after that. Because there were some things that went on during the barbed wire everywhere match that I guess maybe that might not have worked so well, but there was a lot of plunder in that match for what it was worth. Jericho Appreciation Society was locked in a shark cage. They couldn't interfere. Then during the match, Ty Conti comes out to attack Ruby Soho, who was at ringside. They've told that storyline. Anna Jay comes out and turns heel, attacking Soho. And then Soho and Anna Jay work together so that Conti can get the cage lowered down and the JAS can go ahead and attack Kingston with no backup. And at the end of the match, some people were saying it looked kind of off, and Eddie Kingston looked visibly upset because things didn't play out as planned. And there was a set spot with a barbed wire, like kind of a landing that was just all covered in barbed wire, like almost like a little trampoline kind of feel to it, that Jericho fell into to get heat back for Kingston after losing the match with all that plunder. So we obviously know that Jericho Appreciation Society and Kingston, they continue to keep going up and up the blood and guts. They up the barbed wire every match. Where do you go next with this feud? Because I guess it's not over yet. Like, it's still not over yet. Eddie Kingston's still going to continue to go and attack Chris Jericho. Where do they go with this next? And then there was a thing where Luchasaurus has been out with Christian Cage for a long time. And for whatever reason, Jungle Boy finally returns after being injured. And now Luchasaurus sides with Jungle Boy. But he could still be playing double agent here, who knows, with Luchasaurus. There's that part going on too. For the most part, I mean, I'm fine with what's going on with AEW. I really don't have much to complain about when I really think about it. That's what it is. So overall, a lot of things going on with wrestling. A really great weekend coming up. Next week, when it comes to Summerslam and Ric Flair's last match, I'll have more to talk about that next week. In the meantime, quick reminder, I will be doing a post-show for Ring of Honor's Death Before Dishonor this Saturday night. Look for it, WrestlingIsReal.com. We'll have it there for you. If you haven't gone on the website, make sure to go and check out. You can always find information for me. I need to put some contact forms in there so you can actually reach out to me as well. So I'm going to go looking for that and see if I can put that out there for all of everybody out there. So I hope you appreciate that. That's going to do it for this Wrestling Is Real podcast. Come back, enjoy Ring of Honor's Death Before Dishonor. And remember, come back for another Wrestling Is Real podcast because wrestling needs us. Thank you for listening to the Wrestling Is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at WrestlingIsReal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.